Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to TGC Radio, episode 19. And today we're going to be taking a look at my most listened to music from March 29th to April 4th, 2024. And again, let's just get started right away with artists like always. And my top artist was actually 3 Days Grace, followed by Sum 41, Rush, Cassidy McKenzie, Green Day, and Against the Current. Moving on to albums, we have Heaven and Hell by Sum 41. We have the 3 Days Grace self-titled, Life Starts Now, and Human. Of course, all three are by 3 Days Grace. We have Saviors by Green Day, and we have Permanent Waves by Rush. And the only songs worth mentioning are Distant Early Warning by Rush from their record Grace Under Pressure. And we have the new release from Cassidy McKenzie, When I Was You. And let's start at the top to explain some things. So 3 Days Grace is a band that, of course, I've talked about a lot before on this channel even, but especially on the other channel particularly with my best friend Tyson. And yeah, we've talked about 3 Days Grace a lot. I've known about them for a very long time. I knew the self-titled and 1X, and then kind of just promptly forgot they existed until I was in high school. I had rediscovered the band. Tyson had another friend who had just introduced him to the band, and then we started to become even closer because of, we now both liked this band a lot, and they became both of our favorite bands for quite a while, and they're still his favorite band, even if they're not mine. But in saying that, we ended up recording a video for this channel that's just not out yet by the time you're seeing this. That was very 3 Days Grace centric. And that was a lot of fun, and it just made me start thinking about the band again, start thinking about their albums, and start thinking about re-listening to some of these records that some of them I hadn't listened to in at least 5 years, And I was like, oh, that's quite a long time, and my music taste is fairly different now, or not different, but it's more, I guess, it's more developed and representative of me and what I like, and what I typically listen to isn't that, you know what I mean? So yeah, that was a big one. So I started thinking about the band again, and I decided to just, on a whim, sit down with Human after having a song from that record stuck in my head at work. I started listening to that record on my lunch break, and then I finished it later in the day, and I had a lot of just different thoughts and feelings on that record than I initially, especially from the initial listen way back when I first listened to it when it came out in 2015, but even the other thoughts and feelings I had regarding it in the years in between that. So yeah, and I'll do more in depth there with the album roundup video. That won't be until the April one, because I didn't start listening to these till, I'm recording this early April, obviously, so yeah. Anyway, but that'll come out, and you'll hear more in-depth thoughts there. But then the same day, I just immediately started listening to the self-titled record as well. And again, same kind of thing, it just all hit me again. So much nostalgia, so much everything. Thoughts, feelings, some things different, some things the same, and yeah, I actually want to go really in depth with the records here because of everything I've done with 3 Days Grace video wise before. So I have other videos in mind, so I'm not going to go in depth here. But yeah, so that happened, and then today I listened to Life Starts Now, and again, so many thoughts there that I will get into. But yeah, so I re-listened to those three. I re-listened to Transit of Venus and 1X last year. And then I will eventually finish their recent record Explosions, even though I think it's a really bad record. I will re-listen to what I've listened to and then finish it. And then Outsider, I am very interested in going back to, because I actually had a pretty positive response to that record initially, and I don't think I've listened to it in full since that record came out in 2018. Or at least somewhere around there anyway. So yeah, I'm very interested in that, and I'll get to that. Sum 41, I've been a fan of Sum 41 for quite a while. Even if just like a very casual fan who only really knew like Fat Lip, In Too Deep, stuff like that. And I've been slowly getting more into them, and I was very excited for Heaven and Hell. So that came out March 29th. I immediately listened to the Heaven side, which starts the record. And yeah, I really enjoyed that a lot. And then a few days went by, and right at the start of April, I listened to the Hell side. And yeah, I'm gonna get more in depth, but I love that entire record. I think it is great. The punky side of the punky Heaven side is great. I like it a lot. But genuinely, to make a long story short here, genuinely, I almost think the Hell side is better, and I think I almost prefer Sum 41 being heavier and being more of a metal band, you know? So, yeah. But both sides are very good, and I like the record a lot. But I listened to Heaven and Hell. Saviors by Green Day. Like, Green Day's obviously there because, yeah, I listened to Saviors. That's actually the only reason. Like, I love Green Day. They're, again, a great band. I love, like I've talked about on this series before, I love American Idiot. I think it's a perfect record. And yeah, Saviors is a very good record. I don't know why I kept putting it off. Like, I meant to listen to it right away. I was very excited for it, and I just kept pushing off listening to it. But yeah, like, Saviors is a very good record. I've only listened to about half of it so far, and everything in that first half goes super hard. And funny enough, I actually think The American Dream Is Killing Me is the weakest song on the first half of the record. I mean, it's real. Billy's speaking facts, and I feel that song a lot. But no, genuinely, I think it's the weakest song on the record, and but overall, it's still good, and I like the entire first half, like I just said. And like, obviously, I do think the highest standout at the moment is Dilemma, because like the vocal melody in the chorus, and Billy's vocal performance in general, along with obviously Mike and Trey, being Mike and Trey, they're great, obviously. But Billy's vocal performance and the melody on the chorus of Dilemma, I think, is just the absolute standout of the first half of the record. And just like the line right at the beginning of the chorus, I was sober, now I'm drunk again, and then Billy's performance, and also knowing Billy's own struggles with addiction, especially alcoholism, it all just hits so hard. Like, it's already a hard hitting song. Like, the band, I was gonna say Billy, but the band in general just goes super hard on that song and the whole record, from what I listened to anyway, and it just makes it hit so much harder too. And I love that. Rush is there because, well, Rush has just been there really since the start of the year, and I ended up listening to Grace Under Pressure. I still come back to a good bit from Permanent Waves, and I've been listening to Closer to the Heart from A Fair One of Kings a lot. Surprisingly, I actually haven't come back to anything from 2112, which is a bit weird for me, but that'll come up. But nonetheless, yeah. And again, to go more in depth later, blah, 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 you know what I'm saying. Anyway, I do really like Grace Under Pressure, and I don't think I've ever heard the full record, but I know I've heard some of it, and like immediately, I've talked about this before, I think in the last video actually, but I talked about it before, and like immediately those synths on Distant Early Warning, the opening track of Grace Under Pressure, just hit me like a ton of bricks. It was iconic, nostalgia hit me. I know I've heard that song before, and just, I love that song so much. And the whole record is very solid. Like, I already knew I would love Synth Rush anyway. And then, yeah, I love that. Also, shouts out to Crash Thompson. Like, shouts out to him for his How to Get Into Rush video. Like, I didn't really need recommendations for How to Get Into Rush. But that video is great. I've watched it numerous times. And anyway, both parts. I watched both parts numerous times. And yeah. The How to Get Into Rush videos are great. You should watch them. Even if you're already into Rush, you should watch them. And out of the blue, I don't know why, but when I really wanted to like dig through Rush's discography even more than I already had, because like admittedly, I wasn't super familiar with Rush's discography, but I did know quite a bit. So out of the blue, though, when I knew I wanted to listen to more Rush records in full, and I wanted to dig through the discography like I did with the Killers last year, I started referencing the How to Get Into Rush videos from him, and yeah, I started with Permanent Waves because, again, I already knew 2112, so I didn't need to, I already knew 2012, I already knew 2112, so I knew I didn't need to start with that. Like, I knew that record. I mean, I wasn't anywhere near as familiar with a lot of the B-sides, but I knew some of the B-sides, and I knew 2112, you know what I mean? Anyway, you get the idea. But yeah, so I started with Permanent Waves because he said that was one of his favorite records, personally, from Rush. It was like, okay, yeah. And, like, I already knew, I think, like, about half the record or whatever, and yeah, like, Spirit of Radio, Free Will, absolute iconic. Love those songs. Some of Rush's best. But then the rest of the record was so good. So then, yeah, when I finally decided to sit down with a synth era Rush record, I went back and watched the video again to remind myself, what did Crash say is the first synth era Rush record that he feels you should listen to? And he said Grace Under Pressure. And god damn it, he is so right. Like, Grace Under Pressure is so fucking good. And it works, too, because you get so much of the synth, and it's still like an 80s record with the synths, but there's still a lot of, like, Rush in there. I mean, Rush is always in there, obviously. But yeah, like, there's still, like, the kind of, like, Rush you might be familiar with from, like, the 70s and the early 80s still in Grace Under Pressure. So yeah, anyway. Great record. Love Distant Early Warning, and that record along with Distant Early Warning, or that record throughout the month, and then Distant Early Warning, yeah, is the reason why it's there. You know what I'm saying. I already talked about Cassidy releasing another new song. She's released Turn It Down, Somehow, and now When I Was You. And When I Was You, it's a slower, more ballad-like song, and every single time I've listened to it, it just keeps hitting me in the feels, and like, I didn't sign up for this feels trip, damn it, but oh, it's so good, it's so sweet, and yeah, I love it. And also, I'm getting really excited now because she's regularly releasing new original music, and I'm like, maybe is she starting to gear up for like an EP or a record or something? Because I'm very excited if so. Because I love the 3 songs she released this year. And like, I adored Leave Me Alone, which she dropped a couple years ago. And I really am excited for like if she's getting ready to release a full length, I'm on board day one. But When I Was You is there for this week. But that's why she's there for this week, is because of When I Was You. And then I guess the Currents always, like, they're there, you know, like, they've always been there. So, yeah, like, you know. But yeah, like I already talked about, I talked about Heaven and Hell, Life Starts Now, Human, 30 Days Self-Titled, Saviors by Green Day, Permanent Waves. I was kind of surprised to see there and not Grace Under Pressure, but, I mean, I have come back to some of Permanent Waves quite a bit. Like, I mean, sometimes I'll only come back to Free Will and Spirit of Radio, but even still, like, the record is so good, and, like, those 2 songs, and the fact they kick off that record, oh, it's so great. That's why they're there. And like I already said, songs, When I Was You by Cassidy McKenzie, check it out. She's gonna take you on a feels trip, but you know what? It's worth it. It is absolutely worth it. And then Distant Early Warning by Rush, like I already said, it's there because I listen to Grace Under Pressure, and I keep listening to this song because it's so good. I love it. But yeah, this is actually going to be one of the longer episodes of the weekly TGC Radio in quite a while, and that is okay. I like that. But nonetheless, that is really all I have to talk about for the weekly TGC Radio. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, leave a like, comment, or share on social media, do all that good stuff. And until next time, I'll see you later. Bye, guys.